So when I was a kid, I went to church every single Sunday, like a lot of you in this audience. And sometimes I was really lucky because when I walked into church, I saw Monsignor Haverty. And when Monsignor Haverty was saying the Mass, I was engaged immediately because he was funny. He knew my name. He told stories. He was interesting. Like I knew that 45 minutes or an hour, that was going to fly because Monsignor was saying the Mass. Now, every now and then I walked in and Father Vinny was saying the Mass. And I'm sure Father Vinny was a lovely man, but kind of boring, right? So physically I was there, but mentally I was totally checked out, right? So there's a funny thing about speaking. Just because you are a member of the clergy or a business leader or a teacher at Goshen High School doesn't necessarily mean you're an engaging, phenomenal speaker. Right? Like speaking is actually a skill. And like any other skill, you got to practice. Right? Whatever skill you want to develop, it takes time, it takes expertise to develop the competence. You really need to practice over and over and over. Now, my introduction, it's a little nerve-wracking because what the heck is a professional speaker? What is that? I talk for a living? It's kind of weird, isn't it? But I have had the opportunity to go around the country. I've spoken in 40 states, 5 countries, and I'm really blessed. But I have to tell you a couple of things about speaking. It takes guts. It takes courage. And not everyone is willing or wants to get up on a stage and talk to an audience. So let me see a show of hands. Do I have anybody out in the audience? There is no way, no how, never, ever, ever would you ever get up here and talk to an audience. Would anybody admit that? Like there's... Okay. I have a couple of you. I think it's just phenomenal that Goshen is putting on these TEDx conferences and giving people the opportunity to get up in front of an audience. But there's risk involved because sometimes the audience, they'll just love you. I mean, they'll clap and they'll applaud and they'll cheer. And we saw that before the intermission. And then sometimes people in the audience walk away and they say, she was boring. Right? Like you don't even know me and you're judging me. So people do take risk when they get up on a stage. And I wanted to share with you 2 things that I have learned during my 30 plus years as a professional speaker. So number 1, the first thing I learned that this is not about me. This is all about the audience. And if I could figure out how to make you laugh or how to make you engage, then at the end of the day, I am going to be considered a better speaker because the audience will have a better time. So it's really not about me. It's not about the message. It's about you. And are you interested in even listening to what the heck I have to say? So I have a couple of pictures up here of real audiences that have actually listened to me. And I don't know how clearly you can see, but this woman does not look too thrilled, right? So if I'm, looking out at the audience and I see someone, and oh my goodness, I've actually had someone fall asleep in my audience too. And here's the funny thing. This woman, her name is Mary. She's from Boston. And after whatever I was talking about, she came up to me and hired me to do some work for her company. So maybe that picture was just, a point in time where she was kind of grouchy. But then I took a couple of risks, and I thought, if I could ask for volunteers, don't worry, I'm not going to ask for volunteers today, but if I could ask for volunteers and have them come up on stage, that's a really good way to engage my audience. So I was talking about 5 generations in the workforce, and I decided to ask people in the audience from different generations to come up. And this poor 15-year-old kid, his dad had brought him to the conference. He was the only one that was a teenager in the audience. Can you see him up there? Really did not want to be there. But I thought it would be fun to have the audience involved. So I was getting pretty, daring. I was getting daring about this audience engagement. And I decided I'm going to take it to the next level. And we're going to pop balloons right? I'm going to actually pop balloons. I brought a pin with me and everything. So I asked the people in the audience to share an obstacle that they were trying to overcome. And then I had people come up front, right? And it happens to be all women at this conference, but to come up front, and we would go one by one and they would share their obstacles. Now, as a speaker, you can imagine, usually, and you saw this before the break, speakers are very well rehearsed, right? They know exactly what they're going to say and when they're going to say it. Well, when you start bringing an audience up, you don't know what's going to happen. All right, so here are these women. They're going to talk about their obstacles. And if you haven't noticed, I'm kind of big. I'm kind of tall. And this woman with the microphone, maybe she's 5 feet tall, so I'm towering over her. And she takes the microphone, she looks out at the audience, about 1,000 people, and she says, well, I was diagnosed with cancer yesterday, right? And all I'm thinking about is, oh my goodness, how do I recover from this really tragic, sad situation? Like, what do I do in the moment? And there's something I can't teach people, and it's really an abstract concept, this concept of judgment. Right? At some time, you got to just go with your gut and use your judgment. So I didn't know what to do. I just hugged her. And I'm like, I'm bending down because she's a tiny little woman. And I hugged her and I looked out at the audience and I said, you know, I know there are survivors in the audience. I had 1,000 people. I said, I know there are survivors in the audience. So if you are a cancer survivor, please come up to Rosa when we finish, give her a hug, tell her about your story of hope. Because I just really didn't know how to deal with that situation with the audience and 1,000 people. And it's like, well, I'll do the best I can. That's kind of all that I can do at that point in time. But it's challenging getting up on a stage. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk to you about tonight was words, the words you choose to communicate with. And words are critical when you're in front of the audience. And here's a really good example. Right after Pearl Harbor was hit, FDR delivered his infamy speech, right? Now, that particular speech was about 7 minutes in length. And the word infamy is probably not a word people had ever heard before, right? But because of the time and what was happening in the United States, our president decided to use that word, and it stuck, right? It was so unusual that it really stuck. So the words you select are critical, and I like to say to speakers, use positive words. Tell me what you can do, not what you can't do. Tell me what will work, not what won't work. Tell me how to fix a problem. Don't whine about a problem. You know, and it's challenging because the world we live in tends to be negative. We see a lot of negative messages, the newspaper, the newscasters, they're always, you know, there's always negative stuff that's happening. So I've become what's a good word? I've kind of become a connoisseur of good language, positive language. When I see some, I take a picture. So I took this picture up in Vermont, and a lot of people would say, come in, where? Open. But this shopkeeper said, come in, we're awesome. But awesome, we're awesome. I thought awesome is so much better than open, isn't it? Like now you walk in and your expectation is way up here because this is going to be awesome, right? A lot of stuff like that. Here's another one. Please feel free to eat outside. Now what most people would say is no eating allowed. Totally negative. No eating allowed, right? It's like shame on you. But this is, and manners, there's manners here going on. Please feel free to eat outside. So the words that we use are absolutely critical. And then every now and then I just take a picture of a sign because it just makes me laugh, right? So I have to share it. So if you ever decide that you'd like to be up on a stage in front of an audience, there's a lot of things you need to think about. But number one is, Who's the audience? What do I know about them? How big? How small? You do this whole audience analysis. If you're brave, you might want to do some volunteering with your audience. And then the second thing is to stop and think about the words you use to communicate with. You know, any one of you can be a phenomenal speaker, but it really starts up here. And Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So thank you very much for your attention. And before I get off the stage, because I do have this opportunity, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to the Goshen Central School District. This is my 30th year as a mom with a kid in school, and we're done in a couple of days. So God bless you. Love you.